One of the interesting things about American politics is clearly the political polarization, as in voting with your group and disappearance of midstream politicians, people who are able to look and reflect on the needs and the ideas of both sides. And this in itself is an interesting standalone position because if you think about it, Democrats are supporting Democrats. That's not a bad idea. Republicans supporting Republicans. That's not a bad idea. But the problem is, why are they in continuous support of their political party? And one could say because the political party is representative of their needs and is able to give them what they require. But then the real question arises, does the political party, be that Republican or Democrat, functionally able to provide people with what they need? And the reality, and the harsh reality, is absolutely not. I mean, if we're being completely honest, all of us together, then in the last presidential elections, and even prior to that, when we were talking about the Congress and Senate, each of the parties is trying to rah-rah their troops in order to get that majority, get that magic number, by saying that if we are able to achieve that, we will be able to do whatever it is that we desire to do. And if for whatever reason that they are unable to achieve that majority, they claim that the other side's obtusance or interference or reluctance is the reason why the business of proper governing does not get done. In other words, the democratic ideals get pushed to the side because the Republicans stop it, or vice versa, Republicans are not able to push their fiscally responsible and what have you ideas upon the society because the Democrats represent that voice. But see, here's the trick. If that's true, then that would say that at no time did any one of the political parties occupy the central position and been able to actually be in control of both houses, both the House of Representatives and the Senate. And interestingly enough, that would be the case if their justification that the other side is stopping them. Because every other election, that's where the conversation is going. They will not stop us. But somehow they decide to do this, and all of a sudden the stoppage takes place. And here I want you to think about it specifically of two specific instances. Number one, 111th Congress of the United States from 2009 and 2011. There was not absolute, but there was a majority of in the House of Reps, which was 257 Democrats and 178 the Republicans. And on top of that, they also had 57 senators versus 41. Well, wouldn't that mean that during that period, the Democrats were in a position of power that could, in effect, pass any kind of legislature that they needed to or they desired to in order to be able to fix any issue that they could not fix otherwise? And the answer to that question is, wait a second. Was that a unique time in American history? Absolutely not, because once we look at the 103rd Congress, we see exactly the same thing. You have a majority of 258 Democrats versus 177, and you have even more senators, 57 over 43. And what do we have then? And we're talking about 93 to 95 specifically, which means, if my memory does not deceive me, last years of the Bush administration and the entering years of Clinton administration. And what do we have then? Do we have some sort of an overwhelming national reform that ensures that borders are treated better and people who are crossing the borders are able to feel that they are welcome in this country? Absolutely not. Do we have some sort of an overwhelming overhaul of the education system that makes education more accessible? Absolutely not. Do we have some overarching, overwhelming healthcare reform when, our grandpas and grandmas do no longer need to require, dentures, or if they do require dentures, that they will get sufficient dentures or not get access to the lowest common denominator of hearing aids, which actually gives them headache and has very significant impact? No, absolutely not, which means none of those issues were dealt with, none of those issues were corrected. But This time, when they promise us that if they get the majority, they will be able to do it, forces me to ask the question, but wait a second, what about the other times that you were in a position of power? And while we're thinking about the Democrats not doing what they're supposed to, let's reverse it and think about the Republicans. Are the Republicans who were in charge of the alternative Congresses, such as 114th, or prior to that, I believe 105th Congress, were they able to pass the necessary legislation in order to, according to their own positions, either make better funding specifically for Border Patrol or ensure that there is more monies available for education or whatever happens to be the case, or any of the policies in which they're going to treat. Let's speak specifically about the treatment of veterans. Everybody promises that they're going to be helpful. Everybody promises. Their 2016 Republican platform actually says that we are against the Democrats because they take anti-veteran approach. Well, in the last 30 years, with three different, well, actually four different types of presidents, Democrat and Republican, substituting or interchangeably used, and the Congress shifting from the hands of one to another, from the Republicans to the Democrats, and the same thing with Senate. The one thing that we can guarantee on is that the veterans are the number one homeless rising population rate. Veterans are the number one suicide rate or rising suicide rate. So wait a second. How can we listen to them and feel that they are going to honor any of the things that they're going to be saying when they've had the opportunity time and time again to be in a political majority, and they could have solved the problem either one way or the other, but they're not interested in solving those problems, and they're not planning to solve those problems.